I'm Shumeca Pickett, Managing Director at FSG, a not-for-profit social impact consulting firm seeking to drive equitable systems change. The Shared Value Initiative is one of 3 initiatives housed within FSG, and it provides a global platform for leaders seeking to address societal challenges with business solutions. Today, our speaker series is hosting a leadership conversation focused on economic inclusion and the private sector. A healthy private sector is dependent on a healthy economy. But what happens when that economy is out of kilter? When a small group is disproportionately benefiting from economic growth? As the main engine for economic growth, what role can the private sector play in creating greater inclusion? An economy where everyone can fully participate and have fair access to resources and opportunities to advance is foundational to a more inclusive, equitable, and stable society. The private sector plays a critical role in creating economic inclusion through their workforce policies and programs, supply chain and procurement practices, products and services, community investments, corporate purpose, and more. For our session today, we'll hear from leaders from Truist, Walmart, and OneTen. And from this session, you'll learn how the private sector can advance greater economic inclusion by taking on the problems and getting into relationship with the people it impacts, how getting specific about the issues a company tackles creates better societal outcomes, where innovation can play a role in addressing economic inclusion, and the leadership required to shift mindsets and enable the conditions for real and lasting change. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the Shared Value Initiative Speaker Series. They are Discovery, Enel, Merck, Truist, Walmart, Abbott, Sanofi, and 3M. Through their generous support, we're able to make this programming available to the general public free of charge. We greatly value the support of our sponsors and their commitment to advancing more equitable outcomes for society. Now, I would like to introduce Lynette Bell, Executive Vice President and President of the Truist Foundation, which is funded by Truist Financial. The foundation is committed to wealth building for historically excluded communities, and Lynette is with us today to provide a perspective on the current state of economic disparities and underscore the critical importance of economic inclusion in advancing equity overall. Lynette, welcome, and I look forward to hearing your remarks.
Good afternoon, and Shumeca, thank you so much. It is an honor to be taking part in this webinar. As Shumeca touched on, as president of the Truist Foundation, I really get the opportunity to lead our innovative philanthropic solutions that focus on strengthening small businesses and building career pathways to economic mobility for historically underserved communities. We know that this is vital to leveling the playing field so that all individuals have an equal opportunity to thrive. Being part of the 7th largest bank in the United States that serves multiple regions that are very diverse, from high urban markets to large rural markets, we know that we have to focus on supporting those marginalized communities in both urban and rural settings. Our focus is also on how do we support or build into the fabric of our DNA support of women and Black, Indigenous people of color so that those individuals also receive an equitable playing field. The first point I want to make today is that economic inequities exist within the US and across the globe. We know that recent reports from the UN shows that inequality is growing for more than 70% of the global population, which really stifles the economic and social development that's needed, trapping many individuals into poverty across multiple generations. At the same time, inequality is an all-time high. The richest 1% of the population owns about 45% of the world's total wealth. On the opposite end of that same spectrum, the world's 3.5 billion poorest adults have less than $10,000 in assets. And collectively, these individuals account for about 70% of the working world's age population, again, representing less than 3% of the world's global wealth. Now, as we look at the United States, we know that a lot of historical data shows that little progress has been made in reducing income and wealth inequities between Black and white households over the last 70 years. Through historic mortgage practices, Black Americans have been systemically denied in the United States mortgage opportunities, leading to housing segregation and a disparity in home ownership. As we focus on the labor market, we've seen barriers to higher paying jobs continue to grow, especially for BIPOC individuals. Black men face higher rates of unemployment and lower pay than their white counterparts, with the gap growing steeper for Black women, according to the Center for American Progress. When individuals then try to carve their own career pathway by establishing their own business, we know that usually the businesses are considerably smaller for the average Black-owned business. And on average, about a third are in need of startup capital to start or create that small business in their first year. The financial gap then continues to grow when you look at women and other people of color who are also trying to build wealth or build change for their families in non-metropolitan areas. So again, we know that economic inclusion is so critical to how we advance equity, and the private sector has to play a key role. So the conversation today is going to be very, very important as you have these great women leaders talking about how do we build sector possibilities around economic inclusion. We know that racial equity is based on an inclusive economy, which means that everyone can contribute and earn with fair access to resources and opportunity. The way forward is to recognize that it is incumbent on the private sector that holds the key to generational wealth to do the hard work of how do we help advance the economy that better serves us all. Because as those communities thrive and prosper, so does our companies and so does private sector. One way that we know that our private sector can help advance economic equality is by listening, getting proximate, and speaking with partners who are on the ground, who I like to say are boots on the ground, doing the hard work and co-creating initiatives to address a critical need. Residents and organizations within a community know the community best, which is why their partnership is so invaluable. By partnering with the community and the organizations within it, we meet communities where they are and not tell them where they have to be. We're not flying and zooming over communities going, I think I know what's needed down there, when we've never set foot in that community. So that co-creative initiative is really critical. When working with communities to really affect change, it is critical that the private sector implement feedback loops and open channels of communication that provide that continued opportunity to weigh in. As we look at how do we ensure that those reporting mechanisms benefit the community as much as the company, we have to create that nice dialogue and 365 loop that I call it. That 365 loop gives us not only the feedback we need in the assessment, but it helps us to drive that impact. It's nowhere enough for us to just kind of parachute into a community with a one-time effort and think, oh, we're done. Because what happens on the philanthropic solution side is that we know that theories of change are long. They take long-term impact and they have long-term needs that need to be addressed. And so we got to help build that sustainability. Recently at Truist Foundation, our work with the North Carolina Rural Center is an example of how we partnered to co-create an initiative to help spark that kind of lasting change. The North Carolina Rural Center is a nonprofit organization that aims to improve the quality of life for North Carolina rural residents. And I stated earlier that our bank is very unique in the top 10 is that we have an equal distribution of urban markets as well as rural markets. And so launching this initiative with Corner Square, which is a community development financial institution to provide what we believe is capital investment to help transfer loans for racially and ethnically diverse small business owners, for women and individuals in lower moderate income communities, to change the trajectory of how they impact and build jobs or build the DNA of having a thriving economy. The private sector has to play an undeniable role in how we advance that economic inclusion as an employer and jobs creator, provider of products and services that drive the supply chain, marketer, taxpayer, and influencer, finally, a public policy, because we realize as a private sector, we can invest as much as we want, but public policy has to also be a linkage that gets into this arena. We must work together by holding ourselves accountable to those people whose lives we seek to improve by developing solutions in partnership with communities experiencing economic equality firsthand. And then my final point is that at Truist Foundation, we recognize the role that inclusion requires, that co-creating initiatives with grantees helps to drive or create that economic opportunity. While our foundation is very focused on underserved communities in the markets we serve across this country, we hope these ideas have application beyond our target regions. With the mission to advance economic opportunity and inclusion for all, Truist Foundation is investing in community-led solutions aimed at addressing those deep systemic inequities, holding back people and communities across the country. When the racial justice movement happened here in the United States, one of the things that the Truist Foundation did was look at how do we invest in communities? Are we applying the right DNA to ensure that equity is provided to all nonprofit organizations that we partner with, but bringing in race as an equitable forefront to this work? We strive to uphold the principles of a justice-centered philanthropy, prioritizing on BIPOC-led organizations, being transparent in our giving, and using an open application process. And I just learned recently that out of the top 5 financial institutions, we're kind of unique in that process, that our application process is open. We leverage our resources to help empower those communities familiar with the challenges to create and develop and implement those solutions that work. We're not afraid to take risks, and we're committed to nearing those new pathways to equitable economic systems. Being a source for innovative approaches is critical to who we stand to be. We believe that being a disruptive force of voice to transform industries, recasting the nature of a bank and financial services company is essential to advancing equity. As mentioned earlier, our focus is on strengthening small business and career pathways to economic mobility. This generating career pathways, and it's an essential step in how we provide that systemic change to address homelessness in the US, as well as economic inclusion for those who've been marginalized or left out. We partnered, I talked about how we co-create initiatives. We partnered with First Step Staffing, the largest nonprofit employment agency in the country, dedicated to providing economic opportunity and a plan to self-sufficiency. In line with our community-based approach, we are working with First Step to establish this new branch locations to pilot their enhanced client services to provide that 360 wraparound supportive services for those who've been left out of the financial mainstream, as well as of the job force, and bring them back in. And so they provide housing placement, financial assistance, but also the ability to help them upskill to the new high demand opportunity that exists. The Truist Foundation aims to empower individuals in employment, which is key to addressing economic inclusion and increasing self-sufficiency. And we know that this investment in some of our nonprofit partners that drive this work is very critical. Our efforts around financial inclusion tie to our mission at Truist, which is to inspire and build better lives in communities, because we believe that we succeed when we give our communities the opportunity to do the same. Now I'd like to turn it back to Shumeca. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette, and thank you for the statistics that you shared as examples of why economic inclusion is critical to advancing equity. Now I'd like to pivot us to our fireside chat featuring Kathleen McLaughlin, Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer of Walmart and President of the Walmart Foundation. As the world's largest company based on revenue and the largest private sector employer, Walmart has an influential role to play in shifting private sector practices. Kathleen will be in conversation with April Chou, Chief Strategic Growth Officer at OneTen, an organization with a mission to advance 1 million Black individuals who do not have a 4-year college degree into family-sustaining careers over the next 10 years. This conversation will traverse a range of topics related to economic inclusion, and we've reserved time for audience questions. So please use the Q&A function to submit your questions, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. April, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'll be back to close the session. I think you're still muted, April.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Shumeca, Lynette, and Bobby and the team at FSG. One of the things that I love about our work at OneTen is that we simultaneously have the opportunity to partner with our coalition companies while also working in the community. And we have been very fortunate that Walmart was one of the founding companies of our coalition. So I'm delighted today to host a conversation together with Kathleen so that we can all learn and hear a little bit more from her about the journey that she is stewarding at Walmart. So what we're going to do is have a conversation in sort of three parts. First, really getting to know the context and to hear a little bit about Walmart's journey, really dig into some innovations and things that they're learning, and then talking about leadership and the role that each of us plays in stewarding this equity work forward within our organizations. So with that, Kathleen, I'd love to start by asking kind of a basic question about why is this important for Walmart and how have you gone about approaching this equity work within the company?
Yeah, well, April, it's great to be with you here today, and Shumeca, wonderful. Thank you for hosting this conversation, and Lynette for your opening remarks. I think, April, it goes back to our purpose as a company and really the founding of the company. This is our 60th year, if you can believe that, 60 years ago. And really the purpose of the company as it was founded by Sam Walton is to provide access to affordable products that people use and need and want day to day. Make that easy, make that convenient, make things affordable. And, really the mission is save people money and help them live better. And so as a retailer with that as a mission, we really have this focus on the live better as much as the save people money and time and all those things. And what does it mean to live better? Really, equity, inclusion is at the heart of our mission for customers wanting to serve everybody and really have a affordable, equitable access to goods. And there's so many other ways that comes to life as a retailer. So it's the difference that we make with our associates in the ability to provide good jobs and advancement opportunity for associates, for suppliers to provide opportunity to build their businesses and to access customers, through Walmart, for communities, for us to function as a business. We live and operate as a retailer in community, and we're part of 10,000 communities worldwide. And even beyond, if you want to think about the planet and our aspirations around the environment, for us to exist as a retailer, to even have surety of supply of the things that we sell, to have communities that thrive, we need the climate to function, ecosystems to function, all of these things. So really this idea of shared value is at the heart of everything we do, that to be successful as a company, we need to serve our stakeholders. We need to address the issues that are most important to them at the intersection with our business. And to do that as a business strategy. This is not about corporate social responsibility or philanthropy, although those things are important. It's really how do you run a good business? And so people practices, sourcing and merchandising practices, operating practices that allow us to, provide for inclusion and advance equity. That's so core to us, just being able to attract the talent that we want to have and to serve the customers and really to continue to grow as a business. So it's really a point of philosophy. And equity and inclusion is one of the most important societal issues that we're addressing at the moment. Others would include things like climate change or digital citizenship, for example, and so on. But equity, inclusion for people, that is so central and so core to our success as a business.
Thank you, Kathleen. One of the things you've referenced is this combination of not only enabling individuals to live better lives, but also kind of building a better business in the process. And you've described a little bit the shared value networks, or you referenced those. Can you talk a little bit about how Walmart has approached that and how you've really enabled the bridging between sort of the core business and the other parts of the work that you oversee?
Yeah. So really the first step for us in creating shared value is to figure out what are the most important issues that face customers, associates, suppliers, communities that are relevant for us as a retailer and that we believe we could do something about with our assets. And so, first thing is understanding, okay, well, what are those issues? And as I mentioned, equity, inclusion of people really rises to the top. And it's in all of the forms that might be points of difference facing people. So, race, certainly one of them, gender, abilities and disabilities, immigration status, LGBTQ plus, people who've been out of the workforce and want to come back in, would be another example. Military. So any point of difference that might create an inequity. And then to really understand, okay, well, what's driving that? What's the magnitude of the gap? What are the drivers? And how could we, as a retailer, bring assets to bear to address that? So Lynette took us through some of the statistics. For example, if we just look at Black and African American community in the United States as one population, the gaps are significant. Financial outcome, whether it's wealth or income, health outcomes, education status, employment status, advancement, representation in the workforce, criminal justice as a system, the gaps are profound. And so looking at gaps like that, we would then say, okay, well, how can we as a retailer, what do we have that we could bring to bear? And for us, there are many different kinds of assets that we could bring to bear on all of those. So one would be our assortment and our services that we provide to customers in communities. A second is our jobs, the ability to provide employment and to help take down barriers to getting work, and then developing and advancing and progressing is a big one. And we'll talk more about that. Our purchase orders, our ability to provide capital to entrepreneurs, to small companies, help them grow into bigger companies by purchasing their products and services for our own, customers, and the platform of growth that can bring. So those are just a few examples of assets we have to bring to bear. And then what we like to do, and we've learned a lot from FSG in this regard, so thanks to FSG here, is understand then, okay, so if those are tools that we have, just as examples, we also have philanthropy, we have our voice, advocacy, marketing dollars, other tools too. Mm-hmm. If we look at a system, what are some of the drivers that are holding those disparities in place? So it might be networks, relationships that people have. So for example, one of the things that makes it hard for people to advance in employment is if they didn't go to a university, or their parents didn't go, and they don't have those alumni networks already built in, or they don't know people who have jobs or work in companies that they might be interested in. So networks and how do people get connected to opportunity would be an example to address. Resource flows in systems and the gaps that, might be connected to that. So helping people, for example, suppliers get access to capital. If they're small suppliers just starting out, they want to sell to Walmart, but it's a bit of a chicken and egg. They can't sell their merchandise until they expand their factory, but they can't expand the factory until they get the loan, and they can't get the loan until they show they have a purchase order. So we've done things like come in with programs that help suppliers get access to capital just on the strength of a interest of Walmart in actually purchasing from them, things like that. Gaps could be policies that are in place, government policies that may hold people back, and so on. So we work to develop strategies that address those gaps in the system with tools that we have, and then work right across our company and beyond with external stakeholders. So shared value networks are networks of Walmart leaders within the company. They might be from merchandising, from store operations, from HR, from the foundation. They could be from different parts of our organization that come together to look at an issue like disparities facing Black people in employment and advancement, and then figure out, okay, well, what are the ways that we could make a difference on that, integrate it into our business strategies? And, I would just say to the people on the call who are from the business world, like, think about how much time we spend every year developing our business strategies, figuring out, the P&L for next year. Where do we want to make the investments? What are we going to allocate, toward different operating expenses and so on? Where's the innovation and product development? Bringing the same creativity to this broader shared value problem in the same manner is really where, we get the unlock. And it's core business practices. It's not, let's do a side project, kind of a social responsibility pilot over here, and then meanwhile, here's our business. It's really, how do we integrate and adjust the core processes of our core business functions our products, our services, our operating practices, our HR practices. How do we rewire all of that to then help get at a disparity? So that's really how we come at it.
Thank you. One of the specific things you were referencing a moment ago, Kathleen, is access and advancement for Black and African-American individuals. And I'm wondering if in that vein, you can talk a little bit about the partnership that Walmart has with OneTen and what some of the things are that we are exploring together there.
Yeah, well, the partnership with OneTen is an important part of our broader shared value and system change strategy to get at the very specific systemic gap around employment and advancement outcomes for our Black and African-American community in the United States. And one of the reasons we helped create OneTen, and we were really excited to do it, was to solve the issue in the system that is about lack of network, lack of resources. So you have all of this Black talent, it's like the old cliche, talent is equally distributed, opportunity isn't. And it's a cliche because it's actually true. So you have all of this Black talent, all of these individuals who have promise, existing skills now, great talent and intrinsics to have additional skills if they have the opportunity. And yet they don't know people at Walmart who could hire them into the coding job or to go work in the supply chain or what have you. And that's just one example. So OneTen is created to basically address that market failure. And we wanted to be part of it because as an employer, we would love to have additional sources of Black talent that we could then find people who have these intrinsics that we can match up with our jobs and advancement, for success. And so I like to think of it, April, it's more than this, but it's a bit of a market maker in that sense. And then also OneTen, because it's brought together so many thought leaders, so many employers who are trying to solve this same issue, there's great opportunity for best practice sharing. So the working groups that you guys have put together in terms of, skills first mentality. Well, gosh, if we took a skills approach to recruiting and advancement, we wouldn't be relying on 4-year degrees or 2-year degrees as like the proxy for the skill of someone who's coming to get a job. So what does that mean? That's just one example, taking down that as a barrier of a skills first mentality. Working group on apprenticeships. How can employers design apprenticeships that help talent get a shot at an opportunity? It's a bit of a live interview too for the employer to see how does somebody perform and what kind of conversion can you get out of an apprenticeship into a full-time job offer. Working groups that we have around retention and advancement, working groups for the CEO and the chief human resource officer. So that's another great thing about OneTen. And for us, OneTen is part of a broader strategy that we have that is the whole gamut of hiring and recruitment to job design, to on-the-job development and coaching and learning, to connecting people to advancement and career pathways, at Walmart, that really helps turn our jobs and our career paths into a big springboard for advancement. And I'll just give a couple stats because I think it's interesting for folks to consider, and how does that show up in your company? What ideas could this give you? So one is 75% of our managers at Walmart started as hourly associates. 75%. So that's kind of, we're trying to have this flow of people up into these kind of positions at Walmart, but then also to advance people so that even if they didn't stay at Walmart, they're better off, for having been here, because of that. Another kind of example is in the recruiting. OneTen's been a really important partner, but it's part of a bigger strategy, which is around diversifying our sources. So things like HBCUs. We just had a summit this weekend with 19 HBCUs represented to help learn about Walmart, do some problem solving, give them some coaching on resume writing and interviewing and so on. So whether they apply here or want to go somewhere else, it can help elevate their skills and their, kind of own career paths. Or working out beyond that into other networks. So tribal colleges, for example. So we're trying to expand our university and college sources, but at the same time, we are also taking down requirements to have jobs that would say, wait, why do you even need a 4-year degree for a lot of our jobs? And how can we tap into talent and remove that as a barrier? So our field jobs, very few, if any of them, actually require college degrees or, 4-year degrees, 3-year degrees. And specifically taking that away as a requirement is an important step, and something we're now looking, even at home office jobs, how do we remove that? And then using other ways to bring people in. So I talked about apprenticeships. Boot camps is another thing. We have cohorts of people, 15 to 40 people at a time, going through 12-week boot camps for coding jobs. And so these are people that might have been out of the workforce for a long time. They want to get back in. They have raw talent. They just need to learn how to do software coding and some basics around that. So by providing that, we can then, again, convert them into full-time jobs. So boot camps, apprenticeships, we have a career bridge program, and another path that we call alternative direct hiring. All of those programs have about an 80% conversion rate from people coming into them to actually getting, full-time offers. So this is the kind of innovation that we're trying to do in the recruiting stage. And then there's more we could talk about in terms of development and advancement, through different career paths.
Great, thank you. I love hearing about not only all these ideas, but where you're really integrating this throughout the organization. And I really am enjoying hearing about many of these places where you're breaking new ground. I'm wondering, as you all move forward and you're trying to kind of get this change throughout the company in terms of the ways in which you're approaching much of this work and really trying to open up economic opportunity, what barriers have you encountered that you had to overcome?
Well, if I just take each of the stages. So on the hiring stage, it's really helping people who are out there understand how to navigate or how to find even opportunities that they might be interested in. And it's actually one of the things that we're trying to address then through the Walmart Foundation. We have a program that we started in 2015 called Retail Opportunity. That's a philanthropic program that's been running alongside the company program, where we're using philanthropy to partner with others to address these broader barriers in the system. And so one of them, for example, is the ability for individuals to even know how to navigate the job market. So since 2015, we've invested, over $100 million in grants with different groups to try to tackle these, systematically. A second barrier has been the ability to acquire skills on the job. So, there used to be a time maybe 5-10 years ago where a lot of the workforce development programs, even workforce boards, would spend most of their time in pre-employment training or helping people get a job. And then that was kind of it. What we've been trying to do is work with workforce boards and many others to say, no. How do we remove the barriers to get the job and then use the job as the opportunity to get skills? So people are earning while they're learning, which then requires innovation in the way people get skills on the job. So that has historically been a barrier. We've tried to turn it into an advantage for employers and for employees. So for example, at Walmart, we spend a lot of time restructuring jobs and using digital technology to remove drudgery from jobs and really focus the jobs on higher value added skills, interpersonal skills and problem solving skills and this type of thing. And then use teaming as a way, like structured teams, which in retail hasn't always been the norm, and more full-time jobs. We're 2/3 full-time now, staff, so that people really incubate in that role and get the skill on the job from their boss and their peer coaches and so on. And then we use something called Walmart Academy to provide supplemental training and education to help people move into the next higher level jobs, the hourly supervisor jobs, things like produce manager or electronics manager, jobs like that. And just, as an example, we did 167,000, associates trained through the academy just last year. And then we help through that mechanism connect them to career paths. So what we've been doing through the foundation is funding startups or nonprofits or innovators in this on-the-job training space so that employers in general can take advantage of these programs. Opportunity at Work is an example of this, Jobs for the Future, doing really interesting work that we funded. The third barrier has been then the ability for somebody who is in the workforce to be able to show that they have certain skills. So it's one thing to have a resume and say, well, I worked at Walmart as produce manager for 3 years. But what does that mean to the outside world? So again, through the foundation, we've been funding a number of folks, Credential Engine, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce program around credentialing, many others, to create learning and employment records that would be more and more of a standard in the industry, where people would have a bit of a transcript that they would carry with them from job to job that shows what credentials they have. And that could be a mix of things they got from their employer directly, but it could be externally earned credentials like, edX, for example, who we've also funded to create micro credentials that are recognizable skills that show that that person has that skill, to make it easier for someone to move from employer to employer, with that transcript as a matter of record. So, it's a barrier today because it would mean employers would then need to learn about that lexicon and what do those skills mean, and have an ability when someone comes to them to read that transcript, and assess that and know what that means. And then similarly, as the person's been on in their workforce, a way to record and kind of keep track of those credentials. So if they left, that they could take that with them. So that's work in progress. And there are a number of coalitions. OneTen's part of this, but also Business Roundtable, the Multiple Pathways Initiative, that's a big focus of that group. Rework America Business Alliance, which we helped start, is also, working on this. And, I think the mindset has really shifted in business away from, people coming to work, especially in an hourly environment, that's a cost or it's a resource, to that's an opportunity, that's an advantage, that's upside, and it's worth investing in the development of people and helping them advance. So those are some of the things that we're working on, I'd say through Walmart and our own jobs, but then through the foundation more broadly in this system, and trying to create that as a broader reality in the retail and service sector.
It's really powerful to hear, Kathleen, how you've interwoven the foundation work and the company work to really kind of be aligned and pushing in the same direction. I think it's helpful for the audience to hear how integrated that approach has been, especially as you innovate in these areas of learning records, enabling people's credentials and skills to follow them. One of the things you've alluded to throughout our conversation is the challenges of advancement and promotion, and really helping people to be seen and developed and really to be able to thrive and grow into leadership. And I know that that's an area that Walmart has spent a lot of attention and been very thoughtful about how to advance and promote the people who are already within your organization. Can you talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned there and what advice you might have for others who are also grappling with that challenge?
Yeah, well, it's really about, as I said, there are a couple things to that. So one is, as an employer, having clarity about what are the jobs, what are the skills required, and then what are the paths or advancement. And it's really more of a lattice of opportunity. We talk a lot about creating a ladder of opportunity. It's really more of a lattice because there's so many directions people could go. And especially today with digital innovation, in retail, company like Walmart, we have a software engineering and coding path. We have a healthcare pharmacy, path. We have retail management path. We have supply chain path, which gets into transportation and, work in the DCs, the fulfillment centers, and so on. Where, average wage in a distribution center or fulfillment center might be more like $28. Average salary of a trucker is north of $100,000. A retail store manager is a $220,000 job. So we have all these different paths. And so solving that, making sure that's very clear for people about, well, wherever I'm starting, because I could start anywhere along that spectrum, where do I want to go? And what do I need to do in terms of experience and skill acquisition to get there, and mapping that out and making that just part of your experience at Walmart is one thing. And I'd say, for any company to consider, what does your lattice look like? And is it clear to people wherever they start, what do they need to do next to move, and so on. And then the second side of it then is for the person, the person who wants to come to work, helping to solve the gaps there. And so we talked, a bit, April, about the gaps that are out there before they even join the company, not having the networks, not knowing where to go. Like, how do I find out about getting that great job at Walmart to then move to this position? So, for the people listening or participating in this call, like, what is the talent out there that could be right for you, but they don't have the path to you, and figuring out how to close some of those gaps. And OneTen is a great example of an interesting intervention to do that. So what are those? And then how to help equip that person once they get on the job to even know, okay, well, I'm here now. Here's where I want to go. How do I move? And, I see one of the big challenges of our time being the great mismatch between the jobs that are there and then people's needs and where they're starting. So a lot of times people will come to us and they'll say, well, I have these skills, I'm starting here, but given my family situation or my aspirations or whatever, I kind of want to be here. And so, but maybe they're not equipped to start there. So, okay, they're starting here. How do we help them as quickly as possible move to here? So at Walmart, on average, once people join us, their first promotion comes in 7 months.
Oh.
So, okay, that's great. Maybe some people need it to come quicker. So how do we make that happen? And is it the right path? And how do we make sure that that promotion's going where they want them to go? And like solving both sides of that equation is what we're doing. And, I can't remember if it was Shumeca or Lynette, who I think it was Lynette, talking about, one of the challenges in all this work is we're really talking about rewiring a system. And that takes time. Yet we have human beings right now who need solutions, right? So they're not going to wait, like 5 years, the system will be better. Like, no, it's now. So we're trying to do both at the same time. And so as business leaders, that's always what we're trying to do, is to say, well, I can solve the immediate. So my current 1.7 million associates in America, how do I give the best experience and help, recruit, advance, promote in this way? And track that and monitor it. Like, for right now, for example, it's a lot in the numbers. So we have 9% of our officers are Black or African American, 33% of our officers are women, yet 20% or so of our associate body is Black, and let's say 50%-ish are women. It's a classic example. We have it all across the business world where the pipeline gets narrower as you advance. So on the one hand, we're excited that, okay, 9% of officers are Black or African American. That's good compared to Fortune 500 or business, but it's not representative of the population, right? So how do we get there? And we're managing that as we go. Yet we're also trying to change the system so that, what we're working on today actually sticks for tomorrow. And that's really coming back to that FSG framework about systems change. It's layering in the processes, the tools, the people in the right places, all those things to get the long-term shifts in networks and resource flows and policies and mindsets and culture and so on. So you're always it's that bifocal vision of the here and now, and then the system and how I'm advancing it.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to, in our remaining time together before we turn to questions, I want to build on this theme you just brought up of systems change and culture change and the role of leadership. So one question that I'd love to ask you, and this is turning a little bit more towards the personal, is given this work that you're doing in equity with economic inclusion, how has that affected you as a leader? And what is the journey that you've been on as you've been guiding the company through this path?
Yeah, well, I think each of us has our own personal stories of equity or inequity and, in our own lives or our family lives. And just as a woman, I am an engineer by background, and I had my own interesting journey becoming an engineer as a woman. I'm probably older than a lot of people tuned in today. So this is like back in the 80s when I was studying engineering, and that wasn't the normal path. It's still not the typical path. And so when you experience microaggressions or inequity, and you didn't get that opportunity, or you didn't get this salary or whatever, like that's a very personal thing. And then just even in family histories, I think most of us have deep family histories about inequity. So it becomes very personal. Like, my own family, my great grandfather was a coal miner who lost his leg in the mine, and my grandmother ended up as a child having to sell vegetables door to door because the family couldn't afford to do anything else, and there was no work. So I'm not saying this because I think we all have our stories. It's just, I think for each of us there's that personal motivation that says, okay, well, why should anyone, wouldn't we want to live in a society where that's not the experience, where opportunity is available and people have access to it and can advance. So that's one. I think second, as a mother, I have 3 kids and I love them all equally. And, they each have different aspirations and different gifts, and they go off to their school or their work and they come home and tell me stories. And I hope that they're being treated kindly and fairly and that they have the opportunity to thrive. And, I think for all of us here who are parents, that's another very real feeling. And you experience inequity in a different way. So, I think as human beings, we have empathy for anyone, but these personal experiences bring it home more. And so I actually think it's really exciting to be in business today, because there is such widespread understanding and recognition that the only way to succeed in business is to take a shared value approach. And so we are invited as business leaders, whatever our title, we're in merchandising or we're in HR or we're in operations, to consider all of the ways in our day job that addressing equity or climate or nature, any of these topics, digital citizenship, fairness, public engagement, what are all of these issues that are all around us that are relevant for our day job, whatever the day job is, and to bring creativity to that job as a professional and solve that issue in a way that makes your function stronger, your department stronger, your company stronger, and helps many people, like elevates the outcomes for people or for planet. So I think it's really wonderful time to be in business. April, I was with my son yesterday, my oldest. He was home for the weekend and visiting, and he's finishing up some university. And he said, Mom, I've been thinking about it. And I think, I don't know, I was thinking about staying and going into research or maybe go work for the government, but I actually think I'm going to go into business because, I just feel like in business, you can get things done. You can kind of move faster and you can see the difference that you make. And it just feels like, and that's why I'm in business. After all these years, still working in business, because I do think that so much innovation, really comes from this sector. Not alone, we need good policy and government, obviously, and civil society. And, April, we need organizations like yours. Like, it takes all of us. But I do think it's a great time to be in business if you're really passionate about shared value.
I love that. And I love the challenge too, to the audience to say, what is the role that each of us play in bringing this to the fore? And to bettering lives while also building a strong business. All right, I'm going to move us to questions from the audience. I know there have been a lot of people waiting patiently and are very curious to learn more about several of the things that you've said. So I'm going to start by asking 1 or 2 of these questions, but I'd also encourage everyone who's listening to go ahead and pepper those questions over to us, and we'll try to batch or kind of extract some of these and see how far we can go within the next little bit here. So one question that comes from the audience, Kathleen, is overall, given all of these efforts that you will have put into play, what are you hearing from your employees about their experience? And how are they experiencing Walmart and their journey within the company differently because of these efforts towards economic inclusion?
Yeah. So what we're hearing from people is that they are really enjoying the new approach to the teaming that we put in place 4 or 5 years ago. And that's, from the field right the way through to home office, because it gives them that group where they're getting the kind of live coaching and engagement day to day. It feels like it's better for sense of belonging, as well as inclusion. And it kind of provides that basis or that platform then for advancement in terms of coaching and development connections to the career paths. The academy's hugely successful. For a lot of people going through that might be one of their few experience with organized training where they actually get a credential that is super relevant for their job and can be used to go on to the next thing. And so that's been incredibly successful. The mentorship programs, I alluded to them, but just more formally, we have multiple mentorship programs which really help sponsor individuals. So Amplify Your Spark is one that's really directed at people in different cultural communities or racial communities. So they can feel that they're connected to someone who they have a personal connection to. That's been a hugely popular program. We're seeing great results in terms of representation and advancement, promotion rates. 45% of promotions going to women, 40% going to people of color. That's something we're really tracking and understanding as a metric of are things actually working. We just did our annual engagement survey, so we'll get the results back from that in terms of how are people feeling culturally. But I would say anecdotally, like it's working in terms of people feeling they have a better understanding of those career paths and where they could go next, and what they need to do to actually get the skills to move up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, I have a couple of questions that I'm going to kind of group together that's really about advice for companies themselves, and in particular, employers that are either small and medium-sized companies or those who are trying to be less dependent on part-time employees. So some of the folks in the audience noted the earlier data point that you referenced, where 2/3 of your jobs are now full-time. Mm-hmm. And also there's a question sort of about what smaller companies can do to get started if they don't have the potential resource base that a company like Walmart might. So any things that those two questions together might bring up, I think the audience would love to hear more about.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of advice, we've been talking a lot about one aspect of inclusion, which is through jobs. There's also sourcing, and to the extent you're buying things as a company as well. And then there could be unexpected, vehicles for inclusion too. But if we just come back to the jobs, I'd say the first thing is to take a look at the jobs that you have in your company and do that work of understanding what skills do you need for those jobs, and are there any barriers that you've unintentionally got in place because of the requirements that you've set to fill those jobs. So for us, it was some of our positions where we just said, bachelor's degree required, and why? And some of those we looked at and we're like, you actually don't need a bachelor's degree. It's more we were using that as a proxy to show that somebody has advanced problem solving skills and interpersonal skills, and they're tenacious, because if you get through a 4-year degree, you must be tenacious. It was more of a proxy. Mm-hmm. And so where can you take those down and just test it, see what kind of interview you would need to do to get at some of those other skills, or what sort of life experience would be a proxy for those skills. So that's kind of step one. And then connecting those jobs to what could come next. And maybe you're a small company, you're like, I don't have much of a ladder. Like, I kind of have these jobs and that's sort of it. There isn't a lot of promotion opportunity. Okay, well, then people could be with you for a while. And how do you get them ready to go somewhere else? Which, maybe some people will stay with you forever because that job is where they want to be. But maybe for some people, they have 5 kids and they need something more, or they just have a different aspiration. So how can you be a way stop to them to move to the next thing? And how do you help prepare people to do that? And there's so much about on-the-job coaching and learning through experience. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fancy training program where you pay a lot of money to train technical skill. It can just be what people are learning on the job, technical skill and other kind of skills. And then are there some externally available third-party resources for training and development? There's so many. We funded a lot through the foundation. They're out there. OneTen's a great program. Another example, right? Like maybe you got somebody that should be connected to the OneTen program because for their next stop. So I would just say take advantage of those third-party external resources for the development and advancement and helping people connect to that next opportunity.
I have one more question for us about another important stakeholder audience. So we have an audience member asking about how did you manage shareholder buy-in throughout this process as you really work towards kind of broader inclusion within the company?
Yeah. And I'm gonna connect it to another question. I'm just looking at the Q&A. I see there's another one in here about wages, public assistance. I'm going to connect it to that because it's all. I think economically these things are all connected. So, from a shareholder perspective, they would like to have a return on their investment. And to have a return on the investment, that means a couple things. Typically, there has to be an expectation of future growth of the company, and we need decent performance in terms of earnings. So return on sales, return on invested capital, those things have to be good. Our assumption as a leadership team is that for us to deliver on those things, we actually need good products and services that we're buying to selling to customers, and we need talent that's excited to come work for us and wants to be part of the Walmart associate team. They're thriving, they're performing well, they're doing their jobs well, they're advancing. So these things are all kind of the same in terms of what we need to have a good employer and employee proposition is what we need to do the good shareholder returns. And then there are trade-offs all along the way. So let me just talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about wage. So right now, if you look at the Walmart wage lattice or ladder, and again, we have all these different industries. There's retail, supply chain, tech, pharmacy, and so on. Our wages are competitive or better job for job, cashier to cashier, supply chain, distribution center person to supply chain distribution center person, pharmacy tech to pharmacy tech. So that's our goal, is to be competitive in that wage structure. So then the question is, okay, is it enough for the associates that are coming to work for us? And there was a question in the chat about, well, gosh, what if it's not enough, or is it below living wage and so on? That is very dependent on people's living circumstances. So what city do they live in? What's their family composition and so on? And our approach to that is, number one, be absolutely competitive job for job with the next player, or even better. So if you look at our cashiers versus Kroger cashiers, we'd like to pay as much or more. If you look at our distribution center people versus an Amazon, as much or more. So that's our goal in terms of that. But what if that's not enough? What if somebody's coming and saying, well, actually, I have a family of 3. I actually need more than, I only have the skills to start as I don't know, maybe a cashier, but I'd like to be a pharmacy tech. That's why we have such a focus on development and mobility, is to the extent we do have a mismatch ever between what somebody wants to earn and what that job goes for in the market, we can help them get to where they want to go. And so that's very much our philosophy, is say, however you want to come in, let's start you wherever you'd like to start, wherever you have the skills to start. And then how do we invest to help you move up? And in terms of public assistance, many public assistance programs require people to have a job to get the assistance. So sometimes people come to us because we are their job that allows them to have their program. But again, then what we're trying to do, that should be temporary, is move them up and off that. So to say, okay, you're starting here. Where do you need to get? How do we develop and invest in you to get the skills to move up? So it's a very kind of developmental philosophy, dynamic philosophy. And it is about solving what I was saying, is matching what people want and need to all the jobs we have available, whether it's the starting job or the store manager, $200,000 a year job, and everything in between, is to help people connect into that ladder wherever they'd like to be.
Thank you, Kathleen. And thank you for grounding us back in what people want and need, and that shared journey together with the company. I'm mindful of our time. I know we didn't get through all of the questions, but I'm so grateful, Kathleen, for this conversation and for your partnership. And I'd love to hand the floor back over to Shumeca and to thank everyone for joining both of us today and really hearing from Kathleen and her journey and her leadership at Walmart. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kathleen and April, for the insightful conversation. So much to chew on, lots to still consider beyond this conversation today. I also want to again thank Lynette Bell of Truist for her thoughtful comments. Before we close, I want all of you to know about 2 upcoming Shared Value Initiative virtual events. On November 29th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, we will have Novartis CEO Vas Narasimhan in conversation with Allison Chantel, Fortune's editor-in-chief. They'll be discussing leadership and a reimagined approach to equity. You'll also hear about how change happens in an unbossed culture and how it impacts people's lives and longevity. On December 7th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we'll have a session on just transitions with leaders from Nestle and Cemex. Details and registration links for both of these events can be found at sharedvalue.org. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors once more for supporting this speaker series. I also want to send a shout out to folks working behind the scenes to make this webinar possible. They include Georgie Eckert, Emily Mosler, and Gail Gershon. And thank you to our audience. We hope you found this session valuable, and we look forward to seeing you at another Shared Value Initiative event soon. I hope you all have a great day.